Welcome back to the Heavy Wrench. Thanks for tuning in today. Today I am here in the shop. I'm going to try to do a video on this transmission on the 670G road grader. Yesterday and half the day before I had it pulled in. I've done a bunch of work to it. I'm going to show you what I got and where I'm at with it, and then try to take a somewhat of a time lapse of the process of actually pulling the trans. And hopefully I'll be able to bring the camera down and get some good close-up view of actually splitting the transmission apart to see where the failure is. Had low clutch pack. It had low clutch pack pressure on both forward clutches. Now, from what it looks like in the schematic, they're on the same shaft, and I believe that the one bearing at the end is more than likely eaten away. I found no metal on the drain plug, but that's also deceiving because I think the oil was just changed. The filter does have quite a bit of metal. I'll probably show you that a little later. The oil sample came back bad on it, so I'm going to try to set this camera up so you guys can get a good view and see what we can do here. So stay tuned. So this is my first time doing a voiceover, but I'm going to explain to you what I got going on here. Right now I'm pulling off the hydraulic pump stack. There's two pumps on the back. One that's actually in yellow in front of the other ones. That's the actual trans pump. So I don't pull that one because it's going to stay with the trans. The hydraulic pumps were not affected by the metal that was in the system of the trans that we found in the filter. This thing here, I've been using them 4-post lifts for coming up and down, which works out pretty good. Here I'm moving out the AC condenser. I did not drain any of the Freon out of it. Disconnected some lines, blowing off the dirt a little bit, taping up our coupling. That's all going to get replaced anyway. I just didn't want the big chunks to fall in it. So here I am. I'm pulling off some more hoses, getting some things prepped to pull it, getting the hose off of the top there, filling up those two threaded holes. That's where your lifting eye is going to go. Now I'm underneath pulling the trans dipstick tube, which is also the fill tube. Here in a little bit I'm going to end up pulling these hoses off on the back because there's a bunch of 90s on the back of it, and you need that room to come back to get away out of the dampener. So right now I'm pulling those hoses. I like using the steel caps and plugs for these hoses. Personally, I've acquired a bunch over the years. I've got a couple yellow plugs, one in the fuel tank there and one in another one. Here I am tapping out the hole just to make sure my threaded lifting eye goes in there nicely. And pulling the engine mounts right now. Now this engine mount system, I had to come up quite high with the engine to turn them on their side. It actually tells you in the book, and John Deere did a really good job designing these mounts where you can turn them sideways and they actually stick out far enough to sit on the frame. So the engine will sit down on the frame when you pull the trans off of it. So they did a pretty good job of mounting them up right now, but that front piece had to come loose and allow the engine to tip forward a little bit more than what it was with that front panel on that I had to remove. So like I said, I'm getting prepped right now to set her down and loosen up all the bell housing bolts. I leave the top two in, one loose, one tight. I retighten them after I loosen them all the way. Here I am underneath. I'm going to go underneath, and I adjust a couple of times here to get the right height. These 4-post hoists, I can't say enough about them. They're pretty nice. So getting everything loose right now. I got down to 2 bolts. It's loose. Now we're going to a live video here of actually pulling the trans. I have edited some out of this just because of different little interruptions and whatnot, but it's pretty much real time as far as pulling the transmission itself once everything's off of it. The struggle really isn't pulling the transmission on this thing. It's actually getting it ready to pull the transmission. On the back side there's that whole cooling pack that you didn't see me remove because I did that the day before. But here I am, you can see it's loose. The metal on this thing is pretty phenomenal here at the end. Towards the end of the video here, I'll show you exactly what I'm talking about, how much metal's in there. As you get to one suction screen after you get it pulled. You probably could do it with it being in there, but like I said, it's you'll see it really well at the end here. But I like using these pull straps over bungee cords just because they seem to hold things a lot better, especially when it's a hydraulic line like this. It's a pretty good size one, but it's all plugged and I just need to get it out of the way, and it's pretty flexible there. Give a tweak on it. So now we're going to keep trying to pull it. And there's one more hose that I'm going to forget about here. You always forget something, you know. That's why you double check and triple check everything. And you know, I get a little ways away here, and I see that hose down there. I'm sure I see it here shortly. I crawl down. I gotta make sure everything's disconnected, and that's the toughest thing on this. Is it's almost a two-person job, but you know, you do it yourself and keep looking back and forth. Take your time, and it'll be okay. But yeah, I gotta grab that pair of pliers. It's one of those pinch clamp styles down there, and it actually drains the. I call it a dampener, but it actually drains the, I guess, flywheel housing. Not really the flywheel housing, but kind of the flywheel housing, I guess, into the trans itself, just in case there's any oil that splashes up in there. So it's just a rubber hose, but this thing's been hot. It's kind of deceiving with that metal not being on the in the trans at all, and it being fresh oil. So kind of had me stumped for a little bit, but you know, you got to keep making progress and keep moving forward until you find the real answer, and the filter showed that. But like I said, here it's going to be coming out shortly. I'm working on that bottom hose, and once I get that bottom hose out of the way, the only other thing that I didn't pull that I should have was the fuel dosing nozzle that's up on these 9 liters up on top. I don't think I've pulled that yet, but it takes low pressure fuel and it sends it in the exhaust and actually makes it increase temperatures in the DPF and in the SCR system, and keep things regen properly, you know, for emissions and stuff. So it does a pretty good job. Yeah, I think here's where I'm gonna find out that I should have pulled that. It looks like you can sneak it by, but it just gets in there. It's too close for comfort. It's not worth it. End up bending something, but you know, it's definitely is a slow process getting it out of there, but it's not the end of the world. I mean, it's a pretty easy trans to pull. We'll see how it is to go back together. It's definitely going to be one of those tight fits, and you know, getting the engine cranked over in the right position. The teeth on the actual drive coupling are pretty fine, I think, myself. They're not the finest in the world, but they're not the coarsest either. So getting her to line up might be a little tricky on the way in, but not too bad. Yeah, here's where I seen it touch that line up on the top, right next to that charge air cooler line, if you see it. I should have probably pulled that from the beginning. When I originally started this project, I thought I was going to have to pull that turbo on the back side there. This is a twin turbo machine. It does have, it's a 9 liter John Deere engine, twin turbo. They make good power. I kind of like the 9 liter. I don't see anything really horrible with them. The fuel system's a little different. It does have cross heads in it, cross tubes in the head, which are kind of tricky to put new injectors in when you have to do that. But you know, these are pretty bulletproof engines, to be honest with you. I haven't really had a whole lot of trouble or had to work on them a whole lot. They're in some of the bigger excavators too. The wheel loaders, I think they are in some of the wheel loaders also, but you know, most wheel loaders have the 6090 or the 4045 in it, which are phenomenal engines. You know, backhoe runs on 4045s. They do have, you know, they all have their issues. All engines do. So, I mean, none of them are immune to it. And this machine, with you know, some hours on it and losing the transmission, yeah, here's that. I had a clamp on that darn fuel line there that I got to get off there quick. So grab my little impact. I use that 14.4 line quite a bit between the ratchet and the impact. I use that, I'd say 90% of the time. You know, people ask me, you know, when they find out you work on construction equipment, how often do you use 3/4? You know, why do you need all that stuff? Well, I used 3/4 today on them engine mounts or trans mount, whatever you want to call it, because it was that tight. You know, I mean, it just, you need that 3/4 sometimes. So, and a lot of the time you need that 3/4 for tires or whatever else. You know, tracks and all sorts of, you know, undercarriage work and bucket work, and you know, you need it. So that's what the 3/4 is about. But the 3/8, for all your engine work and all your stuff like that, I do use a lot of 3/8. Half inch here and there, 3/4 here and there. Now, it seems like a lot of the bigger tools you use for the hydraulic lines, you know. So, yeah, there's my ratchet over off to the side. When I tap that hole, I have been using that air ratchet for my taps on the way out of the bigger ones, at least. Once I get comfortable with it going in, you know, you get it in there out once or twice and start to get some flow, and you get down there quite deep. Put it in reverse and run the tap out. I don't generally run the tap in with it until it's a clean hole, and I know nothing's going to bind, everything's all set. These lifts are phenomenal though. I use them for all sorts of stuff, so I would say if they're within your budget, it's totally worth it. But yeah, here's the trans swinging down. The next time you'll see it, it will be spotless. I took it to the wash bay, cleaned the whole thing off on the outside because I have to do a disassembly on it, and we'll show you what it looks like here after it's cleaned up. And, you know, somebody's always got to have a question there at the end whenever you're trying to set something down with the crane or whatnot and get something swinging, but that's just how life in the shop is. So here's where I set her down. I'll pick up the video here on the rest of it shortly, and you'll see the metal here real shortly, and the trans will be nice and clean. Alright, we got the trans out. She's hanging in the air right now. What I've found is for sure some metal. Also a couple different spots here. I guess I can show you the best. I found some fines right down in there. You can see them very well, but you'll be able to see this way better over here when I pull out this suction screen for our trans pump. There is some, ooh, we're dropping some all over the place. It's all a bunch of metal. So next one we'll be tearing it apart, getting her all tore down, see what we got for it, and have a great day. And as always, like, comment, share, subscribe, hit that notification bell. Thanks for watching, and keep that iron moving.